Matt went nowhere. He didn't have all of us investigated.
So Stephanie and Doug Bates are here for the flag.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Portsmouth City Council regular meeting for August 16, 2011, here from the Eileen Dondero Foley City Council chambers. I'd like to welcome you all and ask if the city clerk could call the roll.
Mayor Farini.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Noveline Clayburgh. Councilor Lister.
Here.
Councilor Hedgemonic.
Here.
Councilor Spear. Councilor Dwyer.
Here.
Councilor Coviello.
Here.
Councilor Kennedy.
Here.
Councilor Smith.
Here. Thank you. This time, I'd like to ask Councilor Lister to lead us in a moment of silence for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I would like to welcome Stephanie Secord and Doug Bates for a presentation, and I'll let you speak to that if you wish, so welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here as the Director of Public Affairs for the USS New Hampshire Community Commissioning Committee from 2008. And with me is another member of the committee, Doug Bates, of course. And we're here also for Bruce Clark, the chairman of the committee and member of the Navy League, Bob Normando, Greg Toscano, Renee Plummer, and Mike Daigle. And I don't think I've forgotten anybody. And short story for the presentation tonight. We've kept in touch with the ship. I went down to the change of command ceremony from Mike Stevens to John McGonigal last spring, 2010. And I got a call in March 2011 from the boat asking if I might be able to help them find some New Hampshire flags to give to VIPs who are coming aboard the sub on their ICEX exercises, which is a U.S. Navy submarine program under the ice at the North Pole. They wanted something to give to the VIP guests. So I contacted the State House, and Deb Rivers in the Visitor Center said, yes, of course we have New Hampshire flags. We'd be happy to get them to the sub. We'll fly them over the State House first and then send them on down to Groton to be, as it turned out, helicoptered up to the North Pole, up to wherever they rendezvoused. So 30 flags flown over the State House in March from the roof, went up to the USS New Hampshire. They asked for 27. We sent them 30 so that we'd get 3 back. One of them went to the governor, was presented a couple of weeks ago. One of them went to the shipyard and was presented to Captain Fuller same day. The third one came back to the commissioning committee, and we decided that the best place to have the flag reside was with the city of Portsmouth. So here is the flag that's flown over the State House and flown over the North Pole on the USS New Hampshire for the city to fly on the City Hall flagpole. And in presenting it, I just wanted to remind us of something that was written in a proclamation from Mayor Farini in 2008 when the ship was commissioned, which says, in part, a proclamation, whereas before this country was a nation, her citizens called upon the New Hampshire seacoast and her shipbuilders, sail lofts and riggers to build vessels to go in harm's way in their name. And whereas the citizens of Greater Portsmouth, including all those at the shipyard, the members of the USS New Hampshire Community Commissioning Committee, and the sponsors, volunteers, and families participating in USS New Hampshire Week, have stepped forward to welcome the USS New Hampshire with the warm regard and all courtesies due them. Now therefore, I, Thomas Farini, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, do hereby join with all the members of the City Council in adopting the USS New Hampshire and her officers and crew, and extend in perpetuity the hospitality of New Hampshire's seacoast. As you navigate the seas, whatever your coordinates, the history and pride of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and a lodestone that points to 4303 north, 7041 west, sail with you. And those are the coordinates for Whaleback Light. So fly her
Well,
proudly.
thank you very much. Thank you for the work of the committee. Thank you, Doug. We'll accept the flag proudly. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Doug. There we go. Yeah. Okay, our next item is minutes before us of August 1, 2011 for approval.
So moved.
Thanks, Councilor Smith.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Lister. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous. We now move on to the public comment session. We have this evening 5 speakers. Each has 3 minutes to speak on the subject of their choice, and we just ask that you state your address and name and address for the record. First speakers are Jim Nukas and John Tabor regarding recent award. Sure.
John Tabor, 55 Pleasant Point Drive.
Jim Nukas, 64 Thaxter Road.
Welcome.
We just want to a thank you and an invitation. We learned recently that Portsmouth Listens is going to be given the Sarah Farmer Peace Award by the Baha'i community in Elliott. And so we wanted to thank you for your support. The award recognizes the work on the master plan, on the middle school, the budget dialogues, and all of the other work, which we can't do without your support. So we're really grateful for that.
I think the city, meaning both the city council and the school board over the years, have listened, which is the most important thing. That, coupled with the efforts of over 1,000 residents that have participated over the last 10 or 12 years, we believe really make a difference. And we just want to thank the community and the council and the city staff and the school board and their staff as well that's been supportive of the process. As part of the presentation on Saturday night, it's at the Green Acres School in Elliott, which I believe is 928 Main Street in Elliott. We will be doing a very brief presentation followed by about a half an hour of small group discussion. Surprise, surprise. In that small group discussion, there are people from around the world that are attending a conference at the Baha'i Center this week who will be attending that evening, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to speak with the residents of Portsmouth about their experiences in dialogue. So if any of you can make it and would like to lead or participate in one of those groups, that would be greatly appreciated as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, congratulations, and we appreciate all Portsmouth Listens does.
Thanks. We hope we see some of you there.
Okay, our next speaker is Mark Brighton, 285 Union Street, Discover Center. I stated your address for you, Mark.
Thanks. As a private citizen, I would like to say that I like the Discovery Center. I like their exhibit that they just had, or they may even still have it. As president of the Association of Portsmouth Taxpayers, I have a somewhat different perspective. We cannot govern effectively by whatever tickles our fancy, in this case, for me, the Discovery Center. I would ask you to not approve the waiver, waiver of the permit fees. There's no question that this organization is a worthy one, that they add value to Portsmouth. But then so does everyone who comes to looking for a permit for, say, real estate construction. They add value to the city, it goes into the city coffers eventually, should their fees be waived. I can assure you that all of these people going before you, not going before you, but going before the boards looking for permits, feel as though they are also running a nonprofit organization. So it shouldn't be based on that either. There are always a lot of good reasons to spend money. Always a lot of them. like $9,000 to pave over a street and then tear it up 3 days later for a bike race. Yes, there are always good reasons. There never seem to be enough good reasons not to spend money. We can't fund Station 3, and yet we're about to spend $11,000, and yes, waiving a fee is an expenditure. We're about to spend $11,000 on the Discovery Center. We have to remain consistent. If we can't fund Station 3, why should we be giving away $11,000? Please say no to their request, no matter how worthy it may seem. Thank you.
Thank you. I neglected to mention at the beginning of public comment session, but everyone did follow the rules because they were veterans at this. We have a 3-minute time limit. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, Bob Sullivan will raise the placard that indicates you have 30 seconds remaining, and when he puts up the thank you, that means your 3 minutes is up. Our next speaker this evening is Jeffrey Pertell.
Good evening. I am a Portsmouth taxpayer and a Portsmouth resident, and the topic I'd like to briefly speak about is the ongoing activity that you have with the various unions to realize the savings in healthcare premiums.
Mr. Pertell, sorry, just could get your address for the record?
31 Pleasant Point Drive.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry. I'm aware of the letter from Mark Brighton to you and your response, and I appreciate the effort that you're making. And I know we've got to look ahead, but I would like to make 2 points. Number one, it would appear to me that these savings were probably out there for a year or two, and you're our elected officials, and it is a little disconcerting to, it's better late than never, but with the budgetary problems we've been having the last few years, this is a major line item that probably should have been discovered before that. The second comment is I'm surprised that none of the unions, in looking at their budgets, didn't look at this very major line item and come up with the suggestion themselves. And I certainly hope, in the interest of the taxpayers, that you're getting the cooperation that's necessary so this $1.1 million in savings can be attained. I understand that you can't make certain things public, and that's fine. It's been just about 2 months since the article came out in the paper that these savings are out there. I would encourage you to keep the public as much as you can apprised of what you're doing and how things are going, where you're getting cooperation and where you're not, within whatever parameters you can do. But it has been 2 months. It's not just the Association of Portsmouth Taxpayers that are concerned about this. There's everyone who's a taxpayer. So I would encourage you to keep at it and let the citizens know as often as you can how you're doing, and hopefully all of this $1.1 million can be cut off the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bill St. Laurent, and I'll let him speak to what he was going to put. I have discovery waiver, etc.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Council members. Bill St. Laurent, 253 Colonial Drive. I didn't quite know how to do that, but this waivering of fees in a tough economic times, and as was mentioned earlier, this is a fine organization. They do a great job. A lot of people love to go there. But that doesn't aid the taxpayer. They work hard, and they understood that when they got this building for nothing, that they were going to have to keep it up, take care of it, and now they're back for waivers for $11,000. We have other expenses that we have overlooked or passed over because of the economic times and The Taxpayers Association welcomes every effort that the council makes, but they've got to continue this. They can't. If you give it to this, to this organization, what kind of a precedence are we setting? And it also brings to mind, and that's how I didn't quite know how to go into this further. There have been things. There's things like Pro Portsmouth, Market Square Day, First Night, Children's Day. I often wonder, we don't hear from the council. We don't see anything. These fees, these expenses that are incurred by these, do they pay them? Because I know not too long ago that you were asked to cover $35,000 that the Pro Portsmouth wouldn't be able to pay. I don't know whatever happened. We saw talk about it, but the public never heard anything about the outcome of that. So, you know, you got to be transparent with us. I mean, did we pay it or didn't we pay it? People have asked me back then and even after Market Square Day, do they cover? Does the taxpayer pay for this? Do they pay for the police protection? Do they pay for the trash pickup? Nobody seems to know. So it might behoove this group to let people know, let the taxpayers know that when these people do these things, that the taxpayer aren't footing all the bills here. And if they can't afford to do it, just don't let them do it. So I guess basically what I'm saying, once again, we're in hard economic times. Let's not give away the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker this evening is James Boyle, Government Spending, Mission Management.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I spoke a few weeks ago about some drainage issues affecting my property. DES had to step in. I just handed out to each member of the council a copy of a letter that I received regarding that. They had to step in and stop the city from what they're trying to do on my property until they start to follow the rules. The DES letter shows just how much information the city had wrong, and not just the city staff, but also their hired expert engineer. Both the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board failed to do their jobs by ignoring information that I had at my expense provided with my lawyers and my engineers. That results in the city wasting tens of thousands of dollars in bad engineering, and it'll have a final result that if the city ever does get this built, it'll waste about $100,000 when it has to fix it and do the problem and correctly solve the problem. The city's consciously using my property as a retention pond, and that trespass will end up as a major award in the court system someday if we don't get this settled. The city always fails to follow its own rules. We're wasting time with both the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. The Conservation Commission should be disbanded, and we should use state law. And the members that voted against this proposal that's in front of you right there on the Planning Board should resign. The city's wasting more money by failing to take immediate advantage of the amendments that the state has just made to wetland laws that could solve drainage problems across the city for no money. Please remember, city government is for providing services only. It should not be buying any real estate or mismanaging any real estate while at the same time closing Station 3. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll accept that and put it in the record. And that concludes public comment for this evening. We now move on to a public hearing, and that is regarding the proposed charter amendment relative to prohibiting municipal employment of certain elected officials, which is before us this evening. And I'm going to open the public hearing in a moment. Just to state the rules, you are allowed to speak to the issue before us for the public hearing for as long as you wish. I would just ask that you bear in mind your other fellow citizens, and to the extent that they wish to speak on this as well. And with that we will also only have one round of speaking, and that's been our policy for quite some time now. So I'll open the public hearing, and I'll ask anyone who wishes to speak to the proposed charter amendment relative to prohibiting municipal employment of certain elected officials to come forward. I'll open the public hearing. Does anyone care to rise and speak? Mr. Sullivan.
Honorable Mayor, City Manager, and council members. A little over a year ago, I wrote a letter to the Portsmouth Herald speaking out on how I felt in regards to members of the council, boards, and commissions that would leave their position to leave their elected official position to take a job with the city of Portsmouth. This has nothing to do with the 3 individuals that left the school board over the last few years to take a job teaching. I'm very much sure that the superintendent would not hire them if they were not well qualified and met all of the requirements. I think it's a shame that one lady's name is being used in the paper all the time when there were 3 individuals that selected to do it this way. However, I'd like to just talk to the issue as how I personally feel. I do have questions regarding whether this policy belongs in the city charter at all. I hate to see the city charter being cluttered up with a lot of policy type things of this nature. I feel that it belongs in the code of ethics in each one of the boards and commissions in the city of Portsmouth, and they should be published, and when anybody gets elected to a city position, they should be required to read the policies and the codes of ethics and to sign them before they take the oath of office saying that they will serve on those boards. I know the school board has discussed this in great length because I watched it on television, and I respect their decision. However, they didn't see anything out of line and didn't take any particular action on what to do on this. And I really don't think it's the right way to go. I also know that after serving for 20 years on the Board of Education, that the board does not micromanage the superintendent of schools. However, they do establish policy, and to me, this is a policy, so that they've got to get involved into it. I also noticed that the mayor had a question in regards to coaches and referees. I look at this altogether different because these are part-time people. They're not full-time employees. And I have enough confidence in the school departments hiring people, such as the athletic director and so forth, that they would go out and hire the best coaches they can for our youngsters and the best referees, and I don't think that that would have any effect. I'm not discussing short-term jobs of that nature, because these people are hard to come by. I think it should be a requirement, though, that if you're going to coach our kids, you shouldn't have a kid on the team. That makes it hard, because if you go as a coach on the team and you have a small youngster in the elementary school and you're successful and you stay for 20 years, that youngster is eventually going to be on your team if he or she is good enough. So for that reason, I don't think that that should even be a concern of ours at this particular time, because if Rusty is around for 20 more years, he'll see to it that the right people get the right jobs. So, do you have any questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Does anyone else care to speak in this public hearing?
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors. I would like to see this particular amendment go on the ballot. and not to go into the particular incident, but there was a lot of talk about that particular time. And it wasn't so much that we had an elected official get a job within the city. It's that at this particular time, a superintendent was hired while this person was on the board. The contract was the teacher's contract was up while this person was on the board. So these are the things that people kind of question. Here you are hiring your boss and setting your salary, maybe. That was the question. And this something like this can take care of that. I agree, we're not looking at coaches, and because it says certain elected officials, and I'm sure it means counselors, police commissioners, those certain people. But getting into the charter, this is only one thing that come out. This is incredible. There still should have been a commission. All you did was a committee. I don't have a problem with either commission, but when the question came up and it was addressed, whether we should we do away with the commissions, those are things that the people should have been able to decide. That should have gone on the ballot. And you might say, well, a committee can take care of this. Not really, because the committee just listens to the people. We haven't for 20 years had a commission. And what a commission does is it tears apart the charter piece by piece and goes through it. These are elected people who are interested in the city, who want to make sure that everything is going right. Nobody had a chance to be elected to this commission. You know, we didn't do it 10 years ago. Now we're not going to do it now. We're not going to have a commission. That's one of the things that should have gone on this. Should the council have established a commission this time? 20 years, we're not going to touch the charter. I mean, this is small potatoes here. There are some issues that came up for the committee that were pushed aside. But the people, there were items that the people should be able to have voted on to decide whether that should be on the charter or not. And you didn't give the people a chance. So 10 more years, we're going to live with the charter. So, yes, pass this. I mean, we need to change the charter, and there were issues that needed to be changed, but they weren't because you didn't have a commission. And you might say, well, the committee can do it. No, the committee can't do it. The committee is appointed by the mayor. The commission are people, I believe it's 7, I'm not sure, 7 to 10 people, that are elected by the people to go through the charter. And we should have at least been given a chance this time to do it. Maybe there was nothing that should be changed in the charter, but we weren't given that chance. Though there's a certain group of people that would have liked to have been elected to this commission. So I fault the committee, the council, for not addressing the whole charter with a commission and just kind of overlooking that. I think it was bad precedence. There's a lot of things that people had wanted to put on the ballot, and that's not going to happen now. So I think you ought to look at, before you finish all this, I think you ought to look and talk, maybe to have a commission, and let the people, let some people get into this, get in deep into the charter, and to see whether it needs to be changed or not. And you didn't give them the opportunity. So once again, I believe the taxpayer, the local residents were left out of the process. So I wish you would consider possibly looking into that. But it looks like it's all over now. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else care to rise and speak to this issue in the public hearing? Anyone seek to rise and speak? Seeing no one do so, I'll hereby close the public hearing. And the chair will entertain, given who is remaining in the gallery, chair would entertain perhaps a motion to suspend the rules if we could take up the Granite Street softball field item. If anyone cares to make that motion, if you want to wait and take it in order, that's fine, but given
So
that...
moved.
Okay, we have a motion to
Second.
suspend. Second, discussion on the motion to suspend. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous. Do we care to...
Well, Your Honor, under the memorandum in your packet, there is an item that is the naming of the Granite Street softball field. And as you recall, the Recreation Board met in a work session with the City Council to discuss the naming of the Granite Street softball field. And tonight we have the Chair of the Recreation Board here, Carl Deemer, along with the Recreation Director, Russ Wilson. And as you recall, at that work session, City Council was working under Rule 44. And for your information, on last Wednesday, the Recreation Board met to discuss ways to honor individuals who have committed substantial volunteer efforts to the betterment of the softball and recreation programs. And Carl Deemer, along with Russ Wilson, are here to talk about some of those ideas that they have. But as a result of the work session, it was what I understood a consensus to move to name the softball field the Alumni Wentworth Field, with the provision that the Recreation Board come back with some ideas on how to honor other people that have shown support of substantial support for not only softball but recreation. In Your Honor, I would then turn it over to Carl Deemer, Chair of the Recreation Board.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Carl, for what appears to be a quick turnaround of work, and we'd like to hear from you.
Great. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Manager, City Attorney, and members of the Council. Thank you for allowing me to come here this evening. Just as a follow-up to our last meeting, the Recreation Board did meet last Wednesday again to solidify the process that we would like to use in recognizing people that wish to dedicate or honor people within the community on such fields and facilities. In front of you, we've put together a process that we is going through for final review. It's the Portsmouth Recreation Department Field Facility Naming Criteria process. And we've broken it into 3 different levels of dedication. And this is something that our subcommittee had worked on extensively and came up with a nice, we feel, a very, very good process to identify people who are putting in requests for these facilities. On the second page, you'll see there is a dedication request form that will be available. We like to put that on the website, so it's always available as one of the forms that you can find on the city website if people feel compelled to want to fill it out and submit a request. And then therefore it will go to the Recreation Board and be reviewed and fully considered.
Thank you, Carl. Questions for Carl? Chris? Councilor Dwyer. Sorry, I was thinking work session.
I think this is a really good plan. Here, just a little minor question. I notice on the form itself, you do indicate a box for a type of dedication, which is called recreation facility, even though on the criteria, you describe that in general it would be deemed inappropriate for people to do that. And I wonder if that might be a little misleading if that's on the form, or what your thinking was about that, because I gather from what you're saying by the criteria, it's going to be pretty rare that you would make the exception to do the whole thing. And yet, if I look at my kind of 2 choices on my form, I can pick one or the other, so it might suggest that it's easier than I think you intended.
Good. That's a very good point, Councilor Dwyer. And certainly there could be a modification made in that to maybe read recreation component and not give the idea it's facility, because
so it's maybe a room or something
right,
like that.
That's
okay.
correct, a component of it, and that may
okay.
clarify any confusion on that. I saw that myself. And I did want to stay away from facilities or fields or parks. And following the Rule 44, wanted to utilize that same consistency in our decision-making.
Councilor Kennedy, and what I'd like to do at this point, Councilor Kennedy, please go ahead, but we'll get a motion on the floor. We can certainly bring Rusty and Carl for further questions, but go ahead and ask, and then we'll talk about the motion practice.
Has there been any consideration to asking for other letters of reference? In other words, so that on this form you wouldn't just have the person submitting, but maybe any other letters or references that might be included in it? I would think that you would want a couple of references depending on what level they were. There'd be more need for references, I'm sure, at the top level than at the initial, but is there any?
Absolutely, Councilor Kennedy. If somebody would like to submit additional letters or requests to attach to the form, by all means, or they can submit a similar form again, then go online themselves, and we will see that there's 2 or 3 requests for that same person. By the same token, we would also, in part of our process, interview some of the league officials that were involved with that particular individual, and to find out, what level of participation they had with that particular league or organization, and that would help us in our decision making. But by all means, additional letter or something like that will certainly be helpful.
I didn't know if that should be included on your form here, that letters of references are recommended, or
on the form itself.
I didn't know if that was something you could talk about.
I would probably recommend that somebody, if they would suggest to fill out another form for themselves and submit it, so that way they would have 2 submissions showing the urgency of that particular individual. I might end up with 10 or 12 or 15, and that would probably indicate to us it's probably a strong suggestion by the public.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Lister.
Mr. Deemer, I understand the Recreation Department, there was some discussion about naming the field, and this became a very discussed issue at the meeting. But I'd like you to know that I appreciate the Recreation Committee being collaborative and coming back to us with the process that we asked for in a timely fashion, and this is moving ahead in a very positive way, acknowledging people that should be acknowledged. So I'd like to thank you for that, and the Recreation Committee. Do you have any idea, as far as a timeline, if there's any initiation of any kind of dedication or anything, how long that may take, the timeline before a decision might be made?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your compliment, Councilor Lister. We did all work pretty hard for that, and to everybody on the subcommittee worked very well, so I thank them as well for the nice work that they did. And to answer your second part of your question, I believe that it was halfway through September. It was going to be hopefully a field dedication somewhere in the middle of September. The field will be ready, but also a sign and dedication would be available and ready at the time of the dedication, mid-September.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Coviello, then Councilor Smith.
I think it's probably clear what Mr. Deemer was saying in his response to us, but just be clear for everybody at home as well. I think it's safe to say we're hoping to have at least 1, maybe 2 of our first people appropriated at this time in mid-September.
Great.
So not just the field, we're looking to honor their people. And then a follow-up to Councilor Dwyer's question on the Wall of Honor and Recreation Facility. I think what we were trying to get at is that is the request for a specific location for there to be an honor, or we talked about having a Wall of Honor at the middle school or at other locations where it's more in general. So we're basically asking, are you asking for a general honor, or are you asking for a site-specific honor? I think that's what we're getting at.
Got it.
Carl might correct me if I'm wrong.
Right. No, that's correct, Councilor Coviello. We have in the process 2 of those requests that we will be addressing at the time of the dedication of the field, as well as the name of the field that we have requested. We've also taken into consideration that based on that particular facility, it would be sport appropriate for that field to have that particular dedication. Just for an example, probably wouldn't put an honorable mentioning of a basketball person at the Plains field,
Right.
the baseball field. Whereas at the central facility, such as the recreational facility, might be more appropriate for that type of situation.
Thanks for that clarification. Councilor Smith, and then we'd like to get a motion on the floor if we
I
could.
was going to make this a motion.
Thank you, Councilor Smith.
I was going to make a motion to, I move to name the new field, the Alumni Wentworth Field.
Second?
Moved and seconded. It's before us. Further discussion.
Thank you.
Councilor Smith.
I just want to thank the Rec Department and the Rec Board for all their hard work in getting this done. I really appreciate this new criteria you've come up with. I know it's probably going to be a fluid as you're fine-tuning it and working with it. I think it's a great idea that we're now doing something to really dedicate and be able to honor a lot of people, coaches, staff, and people have given a lot of hours to help the recreation in the city. And now we can move forward in getting our new field done. Thank you.
Councilor Coviello.
There's some problems that are fortunate to have, and we have one of those in Portsmouth, and that is we have so many people that are volunteers for organizations that it gets unseemly to try and rank them and pick one and name a field after them. So I think this is a method to give us a larger pool, a larger availability to recognize people and their accomplishments and their generosity of time and labor and finances. And I really am happy to be involved with this on the rec board level and on city council level to support this.
Thanks, Councilor Coviello. I'm going to pass the gavel briefly. Mayor Farini? Just say that I'd like to thank the Recreation Committee and Councilor Coviello in serving on it. I think that this is not in any way meant to be pejorative of any other interaction we have with any other board or commission, but that's a pretty quick turnaround of work that coalesced quickly, and we appreciate that. And given everything and the timing of it, it was well needed, and I think it saved everybody a lot of further time out in time. So I much appreciate it, and thanks for your hard work. With that, any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed? Thank you very much. Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council members, for all your help and suggestions.
Thank you. Okay, we now move back to the agenda where we left off, and that would be item 9A under there's nothing under the consent agenda, so we move on to the presentation and consideration of written communications and petitions. First being a letter from Mark Brighton, President of the Association of Portsmouth Taxpayers, regarding health care for employees and unions in the city of Portsmouth, and also attached is a response from the city manager to Mr. Brighton regarding this matter. Does anyone care to make a motion as regards Mr. Brighton's letter? Mr. Coviello.
I'm racing to find it. I believe would the appropriate motion be to accept and place on file?
I think that would.
Is that what the?
Yes.
So that's my motion.
Thusly, it has been moved. And now we have, sorry, Councilor Dwyer for the 17th century. And anyone care to make a second?
Second.
We have a second discussion. Councilor Coviello.
Just trying to phrase my question right so as I don't get myself in trouble. A question for the city manager. How long, I understand the delicacy of trying to answer these with bargaining still going on, and my question is, how long has school choice been an available plan in the city of Portsmouth?
The program, which is known as school care, has been available through negotiations for about 8 years. It's been around. And we did have one union, the Supervisors Management Alliance, that negotiated this back about 8 years ago. And now we have the management group, the PMA, Public Management Group, also reopened their contract, which was not part of a collective bargaining, but did voluntarily reopen their contract and choose to make the change to school care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councilor Lister.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to just say that I appreciate the opportunity for the Portsmouth Taxpayers Association to send the letter to the city manager. I more importantly appreciate the timely response that Mr. Bahanko sent to the APT. And I guess what I'd like to say, given the letter that we're going to place on file, I guess, the city employees understand that we have to do something creative, and we have to all work together to be able to make some changes. And I'd like to just reiterate so people out there know that it was the management team who initiated this. It was initiated by the employees themselves. Now, we're continuing on, and we're looking at other unions and those kinds of things, but I just want it to be said that we are, that was initiated by the employees. And unlike what we see, so I guess in my opinion, the tone of the letter is a little difficult to me, even though we are glad to provide that information, as I said. But unlike what we see at the national level, I think it's up to us to set an example and see a more positive tone on the letter requesting information. And I believe strongly that in setting an example, that collaboration and cooperation is the key to economic survival. And I think we all need to keep that in mind as we move forward into the next budget session and with requests like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor of the motion placed on file?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. It's unanimous. Item B, a letter from Marcy Silvestro, A Safe Place, requesting permission to hold a candlelight vigil on Thursday, October 6th, 2011, from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Vaughan Mall. Do we have a motion?
Move to the city manager with power.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy. We have a second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous. Item C, a letter from Gene Fisk and Associates LLC requesting that the city consider selling a small parcel of land at 175, 177 Myrtle Avenue between Van Akens and the bypass.
Move to the planning board for report back.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous. Item D, a letter from Mary Ellen Burke, Portsmouth Historical Society, requesting a waiver of permit fees for the Discover Portsmouth Center. Does anyone care to make a motion to
I will
put
be
the ball in
abstaining
play?
from this.
Councilor Smith will be abstaining. Note that for the record. Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to waive the permit fees associated with the rehabilitation project, and I can talk to that.
Thanks, Councilor Dwyer. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Discussion, Councilor Dwyer.
I just want to pick up on what Councilor Lister just said because I thought it was so perfect, which was that collaboration and cooperation are the key to economic survival, and I think that's such a good kind of foundation for the reason for doing this. You know, the number of people who over time have been concerned that the city hasn't taken care of old buildings and property, and since I've been on the council, we have slowly begun with a number of our former buildings, historic buildings, seeking partnerships to enable them to come into viable use. And I think we've all been impressed with what the Historical Society has done. This building belongs to us in the long run, and we're not letting it go. And the fact that someone on our behalf is willing to raise millions of dollars to improve the building seems to me to be like the ultimate in collaborative activity for economic survival. So I'm very pleased for us to do this. Plus, we do have precedent for this since I've been on the council with things like the steeple, with the temple, with other major renovations. We have done similar things.
Thank you, Councilor Dwyer. Councilor Kennedy.
I was just curious what the precedent was.
With, I believe, as Councilor Dwyer said, with the steeple, we did participate in that as well.
Councilor Hitmanik.
Yeah, I agree with everything Councilor Dwyer said, and I'll also add some of the comment earlier was that this would set a bad precedent for the future, but this is a city-owned building, so I don't see it setting a precedent for private developers. So I will support waiving of the fees.
Thank you, Councilor Hitmanik. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Note one abstention for Councilor Smith. Passes unanimously. And now we proceed with the next item on the agenda, which is City Manager's portion of the agenda. The first being City Manager's items which require action. And that would be the redistricting report.
Thank you, Your Honor. What I'd like to do is I'd like to turn this over to City Clerk Barnaby to talk about this matter. As you can see, there is a memorandum in your packet that she has provided you. Also, I've given a summary of the redistricting report, and as we pass along copies of the ward maps that have been overlaid, I will just talk a little bit about, for the public, some of the history. And based on the city staff's research on this matter, city ward lines were first established by the legislature in 1895 and have continued to be amended in 1947, 1957, 1971, and 1983 by the legislature during session law. Ms. Smarling of the House Research Committee has indicated, based on the population figures, Portsmouth would be entitled to 6.45 representatives. It is ultimately the legislature that will determine the number of representatives the city will receive and the method in which it would be done. In order to review the boundary lines, City Clerk Barnaby met with the GIS coordinator, James McCartney, and took the census data blocks and placed them over our ward maps to review and discuss the various changes that could take place. And I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to talk about what her and Jamie did. And then we'll be looking to ask the City Council move forward to submit the request to the legislature to have it as a part of session law in 2012. So, Kelly?
Thank you. You have before you the proposed ward boundary changes that were prepared by myself with the assistance of the GIS coordinator, James McCarty. What we did was we took the census block data and placed them on top of our existing ward map to create new boundary lines. The state came up with an ideal number for representation to be 3,291 people. Ward 3 did not meet that requirement. It had 2,444 residents. Based on that, I took the number of total population of the 5 wards and divided that and came up with an equalized population of 4,247. We did our best to come as close as we could to that number for all the existing 5 wards to meet that requirement. As indicated in my report, the legislature has indicated that the city would be entitled to 6.45 representatives. This is a mathematical issue that is beyond my ability to change. It is ultimately the legislature's responsibility to come up with the total number of representatives that the city of Portsmouth would have. They have indicated that we could use another community to gain an additional representative, but it is ultimately their responsibility to determine that number. In conclusion, in discussions with the Deputy Secretary of State, David Scanlon, he has recommended that a session law change is appropriate, as has been done in the past, and the City Council should request that the legislature act on these changes in January 2012. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Questions? Councilor Dwyer.
I just have a question about a phrase that is in the memo itself, and just a clarification for my understanding. And it's on page 2. It's in the italicized part. And it says that there's no requirement that wards contain plus or minus 5% of the ideal population for a House district. And since we are not creating state representative districts, we do not need to ensure that the population of each ward is plus or minus. My understanding, though, is doesn't this have the effect of creating state representative districts? Isn't that the whole reason the legislature is doing this, to equalize the state? They don't care about our wards. They care about the state representative districts. And so I was confused about that phrase.
This language was taken directly from the state. That's why I put that as part of the memo. I spoke with Ms. Smarling as well as the Deputy Secretary of State, said it was appropriate to include that language. They said because we do it by session law, we would not be required to fall into the minus or plus 5%. So that it was appropriate to include that.
But maybe it's a clarification. In fact, will these then be the district boundaries for our representatives. My understanding, that's the whole nature of the
I'm
legislative
proposing these. It's ultimately the state that will make that determination after they review everything through session law. But based on equalizing the population for the entire city, these are the proposed boundaries that I have set, but it will ultimately be their decision.
But then when it is their decision, these would be, look, our local ward boundaries, but would these also, I guess my question is, do these also then serve as the, will we be electing representatives to the general court from these ward boundaries at this point, as opposed to at large? Is that correct?
Yes.
They could, did you want to answer that, Bob? I'm sorry.
Just going to say that, as Kelly said, in the end, it's the state legislature that's going to set the ward boundaries.
Right.
If they set these ward boundaries, then we'll elect our representatives from these ward
But
boundaries.
they don't necessarily.
They don't necessarily have to.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Right. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Further questions and discussion? No,
Thank you.
We need a motion to authorize the submittal of the adjusted ward lines on behalf of the City Council to the legislature, requesting a session law to act upon the reflected new boundaries.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. I'll pass the gavel.
Mayor Perini?
I'll just say that I intend to vote for this because I understand ultimately who does what they do to make this change. I do think that the way we have elected representatives in Portsmouth is something that I support, but in the end, it is the general court that will make that decision.
Because I was down below, could I have who made the motion, who seconded it?
I made the motion.
I second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It's unanimous. Item 2.
The next item, Your Honor, is the proposed charter amendment, and I would turn it back to for a motion.
Okay. We will need a motion to authorize the city clerk to place the referendum question as presented on the municipal ballot on the November 8th, 2011 municipal ballot, incorporating the provision into the municipal charter. Does anyone care to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor
Second.
Smith. Seconded. Discussion. Council Coviello.
I wanted to address a couple points that were brought up during the comment session or the public hearing, and one was whether it should be in the Code of Ethics and not the Charter. And my understanding is, and I'll ask the City Attorney, I believe the Code of Ethics is in the Charter.
Should I answer?
Please do.
The Code of Ethics flows from the Charter, and in many places the Charter requires the Code of Ethics to establish standards. Mr. Sullivan's comments are well taken, and if the school board and particularly the police commission and the fire commission were in agreement, this same principle could be created by means of amending codes of ethics. The sticky issue becomes the school board and the city council's ability to control the school board by amending the code of ethics. For that reason, and because of the fact that there are already provisions in the municipal charter that talk about councilors and school board members not having municipal employment, for example, I thought that in this particular case the charter might be an appropriate place to put it.
Okay, thank you. And then
Councilor Coviello.
continue. Mr. St. Laurent brought up some of the issues that were, in his words, brushed aside, and how we should have had a commission, an elected commission, and to put forward for a referendum. And I would posit that we did have a referendum of sorts. We had a body gather and seek public input, and I think even he would have to agree that not many people showed up for the meetings. And we largely did what most of the people that did show up asked us to do, and very democratic process. I don't think it would be wise to go through the effort of a charter commission, which I believe is not just 10 or 12, I think it was something like 20 members that could get elected. It's a huge amount of effort for what came down to probably less than 5 people requesting it in a city of 22,000 people. I don't think that's an appropriate way to respond. And again, no one brought up much of the issues that were brought up during the hearings were not charter related, as discussed with the staff and the city attorney. So items I take issue with the words brushed aside. We considered every request individually, responded to every request individually. And I believe we are doing what has been asked of us to do by the public.
Thank you, Council Coviello. Any further discussion? If not, ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. It's unanimous. We skip item 3 as it has been addressed. Item 4.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next item is acceptance of a sidewalk easement regarding 125 Brewery Lane. Sacco Avenue Professional Building, Inc. is the owner of 125 Brewery Lane. This is the former Public Works facility. Sacco Avenue received site plan approval from the City Planning Board in November of 2005 for the redevelopment of the property. That site plan approval has been extended multiple times, in part to accommodate the city's Bartlett and Islington Street sewer separation project. The city's sewer separation is complete, and Sacco Ave Professional Development is prepared to commence the redevelopment of this property. As a condition of approval, Sacco is required to convey a sidewalk easement to the city, and I've attached a copy of an aerial photograph showing the unimproved site as well as the attached sidewalk easement showing the easement area. The Department of Public Works, the Planning Director, and the Legal Department have reviewed and approved this easement document. I'd ask for approval.
You heard the requested action. Does anyone care to make a motion in accordance with that?
Authorize the city manager to accept the easement at 125 Brewery Lane from Sacco Ave Professional Building.
Second.
Thank you, Councilors Smith and Lister. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous. Item 5.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next item is a proposed purchase of conservation land regarding an island in Sagamore Creek. Attached a letter from Robert Thornton representing David Lynn, owner of a small island in Sagamore Creek. Mr. Lynn is offering the island to the city for $25,000. By way of background, the sale of this island was first brought before the Conservation Commission last fall for their consideration. The Conservation Commission was unclear as to the natural resource values of this land and did not have a dollar amount associated with the purchase. In February of this year, the owner sent an email offering the island for a sale price of $28,000, at which point the Conservation Commission was still uncertain as to whether it was an important piece of property to protect for a conservation standpoint. To investigate this question further, the Commission used the balance of the public undeveloped lands assessment funds to hire West Environmental to conduct a natural resource assessment of this land, and I've attached a copy of West's report. Upon reviewing the results of the work, the Commission was in agreement that they would like to see the island protected. However, there was no consensus on whether to pay the full asking price or attempt to negotiate a lower price. Since that time, the owner has been informed of the Commission's unanimous agreement that they would like to see the island added to the city's conservation inventory. The next step would be to refer this matter to the Planning Board for a report back to the City Council. And as you're aware, all properties either purchased or sold by the city need to be reviewed by the Planning Board and report back to the City Council. You should note that the revised offer by Mr. Lynn is to sell the property at $25,000. And the assessed value on this property at this time is $153,000. My recommendation is to continue moving this forward, and that would go to the Planning Board for a report back. That would be the motion that I would ask for.
So moved.
Thanks, Councilor Kennedy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous.
Thank you, Your Honor. Next item is request for a license from Joanne Wyron, owner of Art with a Splash, for property located at 82 Fleet Street. She's asking that her request be withdrawn this evening. She's looking at relocating the sign to another portion of the building, so I will just be withdrawing that item, Your Honor, and bringing it back at a later date. The next item is item number 7, polling hours for November 8, 2011 municipal election. It attaches a memorandum from Kelly Barnaby, City Clerk, recommending the polling hours for a municipal election be set from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., and we would need a council action to set those hours.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Councilor Kennedy.
I just have a question. Given the amount of people that work outside the city, have you seen any benefit in maybe going to 8 o'clock, so 8 to 8? I know a lot of communities have moved that way, in that direction, just to allow those commuters and those people that are having to put more extra time into the work environment to be able to vote.
I would ask City Clerk Barnaby to respond to that, but before she does, I would like to just make note of it's been a challenge over the years to try to get people to work. And it's not just that they're working from, 8 a.m. to 7. It's that they're working probably from 6 or 5:30 a.m. to 9:30 to 10 at night. And we have a wide variety of volunteers, or people, I call them volunteers because that's basically what they are, even though they get paid a minimal amount. But Kelly, if you'd like to speak to that.
Sure. I have looked at that issue, and as indicated by Mr. Bohanko, it is challenging to get people to work, and it is quite a long day. Some of them do get there at 5 in the morning, don't get back to our office till 11. Then they have to wait for us to review all of their paperwork. That is why the legislature put in the law to allow for those people that work outside of the community or that work later than the polling hours are open to get an absentee ballot.
Well, do we have a motion to establish the hours? I don't think we do.
So moved.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Council
we did.
Coviello.
We did.
We did.
Yeah,
We've
we
had a
did.
motion, then I guess we have to vote on it.
Yep.
So I was just testing you. All right.
okay.
All right, my apologies. And, good. Any further discussion, first of all? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Any opposed? None opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you, Your Honor. The next item is an acceptance of a drainage easement. Linda Harding is the owner of a approximately 2-acre parcel at 1808 Islington Street. Ms. Harding received approval from the city's planning board in October to subdivide the parcel into 2 lots. As part of the subdivision approval, various easements to and from the city were required. The City Council has previously approved several of the easements on September 7th, 2010. However, additional drainage easements were subsequently identified. These drainage easements will run from Islington Street in favor of the city across lots 1 and 2, and I've attached a copy of a plan that you can refer to, showing these easements across Lot 2 in red and easements across Lot 1 in blue. What the Public Works Department, the Planning Director, and the Legal Department have reviewed and approved these easement documents. I would ask for approval from the City Council.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? It's unanimous. Item 9.
Thank you, Your Honor. This next item is the retirement rates. Attaches an announcement from the New Hampshire retirement system regarding the employee contribution rates that were recertified pursuant to House Bill 2, effective August 1, 2011 through June 30, 2013. The additional costs over and above what has been budgeted for FY12 for each group is as follows. And I just want to make a note here that they transpose the numbers. So the actual police number is $170,700, and the fire number is $101,405. So that should be flipped. And the school is $302,584 for a total of $521,689. If the City Council recalls, as we were going through our budget process, there was a lot of activity at the legislature that dealt with this issue, specifically the issue of the subsidy for police, fire, and schools. And that subsidy has been adjusted. And we're still waiting for some of the clarification on some of about $3.5 million that was set aside by the state legislature, but we have yet to see what that calculation would be. I suspect it's not going to be substantial for us, but whatever it is, I'll advise the council, and we'll set that aside for future pension obligations. So the $421,689. During the budget process, City Council will recall that there was a lot of activity and discussion regarding this, and one of the ideas, and actually went forward in the consensus, was to change the name of the collective bargaining contingency to collective bargaining and pension contingency, just to handle this matter. In accordance with the city charter 7.16, the City Council can transfer money from one department to another, which this is, and it would have to do it at a meeting and then authorize me to do so. It does not require a public hearing. It just requires a City Council action. I did not want to put that before you for action tonight, but I rather thought it was important to have it at least noticed before you, and that action I would recommend come at the September 6th meeting.
Having heard the explanation, therefore, I don't know that unless the people want to make a motion to vote against it, it's perfectly right for me to just put it on the agenda if that's everyone's wish, so we needn't go through the formalized voting process. Is that okay with everybody? Councilor Dwyer?
Just some questions that might be helpful for the public. I know there was a lot of publicity from both the Senate and the House about, quote, making cities and municipalities whole with the changes that
Right.
they made. Is this that, or is that ahead of us?
Let me just try to explain what I know, and if anybody has other information, I'm be happy for anybody to jump in. What happened was, and this is a little bit of politics that took place, but the legislature towards the end of before the end of the fiscal year, well, actually the retirement board certified rates that actually raised rates and actually were requiring cities and towns to pay 100%, as of July 1 for their retirement. So instead of the 75-25 that we anticipated, it would have been 100%. The legislature actually changed the makeup of the retirement board so that they rescinded the vote of that prior retirement board. So what happened was the legislature actually took the retirement board and changed the membership makeup because of that vote, or it seemed like that was the reason they did that. And so that what happened was, because the vote was in place on January 1 and the new board was not in place, we had to pay 100% rather than the 75-25 or the 35-65 rate. That 100%, though, would not be credited for us. So what we did is, so that's part of this is included in there, and so when they recertified the rates, they took that into account, the new board.
So it's like a discounted rate.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but the July rates are still in here, and we're going to be stuck with those. So added a little bit to what we had to pay. For the next 11 months, it's better than what we anticipated. But the whole idea of what's subsidized and what isn't is still a little bit unclear. We're happy about the certified rates the way they came in, because they're not just certified to June 30th of 2012, but they're certified right through the June 30th of 2013. I was very worried that we would have had about $1 million gap next year. But these rates have been recertified until 2013, which means that these are the numbers that we will have through next fiscal year based on our salaries. Of course, if salary goes up, the percentages will then increase the cost for us on the pension side. But that's the good news of it. There is still $3.5 million that the legislature set aside that needs to be divvied up to the communities. That was their way of filling the gap. I'm trying to track down what those numbers are, and when I do, I will let you know. But $3.5 million, I don't assume will go that far, but any little bit certainly will help. And so I'm working with Senator Stiles to try to get those numbers.
Being made whole may be a relative concept.
Well, I think the good news is if you look at the attachment from the retirement board, it is good news for fiscal 13 that we do have a number in place that we can work with, and that's the important one. I was very concerned that the recertification wouldn't have been for the 2 years, but this is recertified for 2 years. These are good through June 30th, 2013.
Well, thank you for that. And so, sorry, Councilor Dwyer.
Just a little follow-up. Does that take into account the lowering of the estimated rate of return?
Everything, so when they recertify the rates,
that's there
they
too.
look at everything.
Okay.
They look at everything. Now, was that part of their actuarial review? And was that part of the recertification? I don't know at what level that is. I didn't get down into that.
Council Kennedy.
John, for the next meeting, maybe you could give us some information on what other communities are doing to absorb this amount.
Yeah.
And also, I know some communities partially have put it right back on the employees. And so I guess the question I would have is, what are other communities out there doing?
Okay. I assume they're doing similar to what we're doing, but I'll check it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy. Any further discussion on this? There's no motion pending, and I'm just going to represent that we'll put it on the agenda for action with the requests made that have been made. Item 10.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me get to that. This is a request to expend $860 from the Conservation Fund to conduct a natural resource assessment of the Sanderson property off of Spinney Road. I'd like to have Peter Pritz come down and speak to this issue. It was before the Conservation Commission. There's been some correspondence that have been going back and forth relative to this. And before any decisions are made on behalf of the City Council, it would be helpful to hear from Peter and maybe go forward with the proposal from the Conservation Commission.
Thank you, John. Welcome, Peter.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. The Sanderson family is looking to subdivide the property on Spinney Road, the property that people know of across from the water tower. And they're really early on in the process. They spoke with some neighbors. Some of the neighbors said to the Sandersons, have you looked at putting that land into conservation? And so as a result, he came to the Conservation Commission and Planning Board to discuss the issue of whether that land could be protected as a conservation property. The result of that was both boards, actually, the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission, said, we'd like to know more information about that. As you know, we recently completed our public undeveloped lands assessment, and we have a pretty set methodology for looking at open space and conservation values for properties. Both boards were interested in doing that. The Conservation Commission thought it would make sense before they went too far down the process to have this information in front of them, so they voted to do that study based on first I had an estimate from Mark West, who did the work citywide, and got the dollar amount that I could bring back to the Conservation Commission, at which point they voted to authorize the expenditure to the City Council, which would ultimately authorize the expenditure, recommend the authorization, from their Conservation Fund, which is something that they have in reserve in order to protect properties and to study conservation properties. So,
and that requires, they can recommend to the City Council, but the City Council ultimately has to vote.
Yeah. So that's why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We need a motion.
Do we have a motion to accept the Conservation Commission's recommendation to expend the $860?
So moved.
Thanks, Council Kennedy. We got a second discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? It's unanimous.
Your Honor, I just have some informational items for you. I'll refer to the City Clerk regarding municipal election final period.
Sure. The filing period will begin on Monday, August 29th, and end on Monday, September 12th. Filings will be accepted in my office from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. The fee for running for City Council, School Board, Police, or Fire Commission is $5, or the submittal of 50 petitions. The fee for ward officials, moderator, ward clerk, and selectmen will be $1, and those are determined through party caucus.
Thank you, Kelly. That's all I have, Your Honor. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions the City Council might have.
And we have it. Questions for John? Hearing none, we'll move on to Mayor's portion of the agenda. And before you, you have two appointments for consideration. Chris Hubbard for appointment to the Pierce Island Committee. The other is that of Dana Levinson. And I'll just caution you to say that Dana was happy to put in his application. He was hiking in Montana, I think, or Wyoming, rather. And so his wife did fill this out by proxy, and I feel I have a duty to let you know that. But he is aware and interested in serving. And then we have two resignations, so there's no vote required. Resignations from, in the first instance, long-serving Planning Board member Don Coker from the Planning Board, and we have a letter in your packet. And do we have a motion with regard to that?
Move to accept with regret and a letter of thanks to follow.
Thank you, Councilor Smith. And then a letter from John Connors from the Traffic and Safety Committee.
Again, move to accept with regrets and a letter of thanks to follow.
Thank you. Discussion, do we have a second on those?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, it's unanimous. That is all I have at the present time. Councilor Lister.
Thank you very much. This is a brief update on the activities of the USS Virginia from the host committee from Portsmouth. Since the boat came into the Navy Yard in September, there have been several different activities that have been ongoing, and I just wanted to be able to mention some of these and also take the opportunity to thank a few people. Since September, we've provided continuous support to the crew, and we've provided some volunteer opportunities for the crew members in the schools and nonprofit organizations. We've had a holiday party. We on July 4th, the South End invited the crew, thanks to Councilor Kennedy and the members of the South End, the residents, that put on, which I think was an awesome party, and it was very well done and greatly appreciated by the crew. We've involved the families in Market Square Day and different other events. We just completed last week a 3-on-3 basketball tournament with the police, fire, and recreation department. And I have to say that at the end of the evening, it was the crew members on the boat that walked away with all the trophies. But we appreciate all the competition. We've provided some car shows, antique auto shows in the past for the crew to visit. They certainly attended the air show. We are in the process of putting on a clam bake at the end of August, sponsored by donations from individuals and corporations, and also working with the Propeller Club. We're also always accepting donations to be able to help some of our activities. And if anyone would like to make a donation, they can send a donation to the American Legion hobby post on Islington Street, and that'll help us with some of the activities that we've been involved in. And the American Legion has been very involved in providing parades and events for the crew to participate in. I'd like to just thank a couple of people, and this is going to be ongoing, and I have to say that the crew from the USS Virginia and some of the individuals from the crew of the USS San Juan have really been overwhelmed by the generosity of the people in residence in Portsmouth, and just keeping the military tradition and the whole issue of what our culture is. I'd just like to pass on everyone's appreciation. But I'd like to thank Captain Salter, who's the commander of the boat, Chief Eric White, Sean Schleeper, who is one of the wives of one of the crew members, because the wives and the families and the kids have been very involved in some of our activities. I would like to also mention Pat Remick, who works for the city, who's been instrumental in providing a lot of work to be able to keep the communication and collaboration going. The members of the host committee certainly acknowledge the community support, the corporation in business donations that I mentioned, and we will continue these activities until the boat leaves. I'd also like to just mention the positive media coverage for our activities from Seacoast Online, Patch.com, Foster's, and several other media outlets that we really appreciate all their support showing up at the activities. And just again to thank everyone for their support. We expect that the boat will probably be here until sometime in February, we believe. And between now and then, we will continue to have activities, involve the families and their crew members in different activities. And they are just really overwhelmed, and again, for the 42nd time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great job, Bob, to you and all. That's really a wonderful thing. With that, we move on to miscellaneous unfinished business. Does anyone care to make any? Councilor Dwyer.
We received in our weekly packet what I think has a great potential, and it's the Comcast program for Internet Essentials, where children from low-income families who are eligible for school lunch are eligible to purchase a pre-configured computer for $149. And I think this just seems like an incredible offer. I did contact the school department and know that they will be sending out this information with the beginning of school to all parents, but it seemed to me it's a great opportunity for people in the community who might want to sponsor a child or who might want to contribute, whether it's through our welfare office or others, to help with that participation. I think that lots of people know that the whole digital divide, the difference between families that have computers at home and families that do not, is just a major divide in our country. And this seems like an incredible opportunity. So I'm hoping that the paper will give some publicity to this, and that we might, through our welfare office, be able to collect some donations, as they do for back-to-school supplies, but this might be something that they could also do in conjunction with the school department.
That's a great thing to notice, Councilor Dwyer, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. perhaps we'll think about city website or newsletter opportunities in that regard as well. Thank you. Any further items of miscellany? Councilor Kennedy.
In review of Superintendent McDonough's letter about the occupancy limits and what I've been reading about in the paper about Little Harbor School and the potential of more students, when we review all that, can we also review pickup and drop off of individuals, of students and families, and they're sitting on street in front of neighborhood houses and driveways and that kind of thing? Can we review all that? Because if we have new numbers in there, I know there's been some concerns by some of the residents for people that are idling and sitting out in front of their house and waiting for pickup and drop off of Little Harbor students in that neighborhood. So if we could consider that too, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks. Councilor Dwyer.
Can I maybe just build on what Councilor Kennedy said? I know it's unusual for us to be dealing with school board issues, but I think it would be very helpful once, I know the school board's meeting tomorrow to determine what they will do, but because these issues have been complex, they have involved so much energy from so many residents in the city, and there's a lot of confusion about it. I wonder if it would be appropriate to ask the school board or the superintendent to just give us a report that kind of at their next meeting, so we all hear it straight from them in terms of what they've decided to do, how they've decided to handle it, and that it becomes part of the public. Is that an appropriate thing?
It is. If you wish, I'll fashion a letter, and we'll ask them to do that. That's
really
good.
An informational thing, not like a demand.
No. Very good. Yeah. Just a briefing. We can do that. Any further miscellaneous items?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I can just tag on Councilor Dwyer, if we're going to send a letter to the superintendent and ask them to be here, could we maybe give him some idea of what some of the issues might be? Councilor Kennedy's talking about idling and drop-off.
I think we were requesting, what was requested is that they would address that at they're going to address that at their own meeting. In any case, we just wanted to get a report about that as opposed to having that written report, as opposed to them having come to make a presentation.
Your Honor, I think the protocol would be, if you're writing the letter, that it should go to Mitch with a copy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's something that we should be involved in.
Right. Okay. Any further miscellaneous items?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much and good night.